Hello fellow tankers, this is Dauntless and welcome to Scout Guide. For this episode, I'll be showcasing how to effectively spot on the map Fisherman's Bay. Now Fisherman's Bay is an awesome map for playing light tanks in because there are a lot of opportunities to get good spotting damage. The map is slightly elevated right here in the middle and it's kind of depressed here in the north and the south, allowing you to peek these ridges and drive through the town getting good spots on both sides if you choose to actively scout. Now I personally like to play this map passively, and I'll show you my favorite locations. So starting on the north base, I typically like to head to this house right here on E6. Now you want to get there as quickly as possible and just sit yourself in the bush. Now getting damage here, or spotting damage, is very variable depending on how many arty you have that are going to be pre-aiming. Make sure you let them know ahead of time what you're going to be doing, and also if you have team members that are going to come up and shoot with you. I've had games where I farmed 3,000 damage within the first couple of minutes sitting here, and then there are moments where you have nothing shooting for you, but as long as you're double bushed like this, and by double bushed I mean there is a non-transparent bush between what you're shooting and yourself, you can actually shoot quite nicely without getting lit. Now when you do sit here, make sure that the bush you're sitting in front of is transparent, or not, is transparent, so you can effectively see through it and get those lights. Now you don't want to overstay your visit here, if you get lit especially, but usually it's only good for just seeing what pushes into the city. Alright, so once you've overstayed your visit over behind that building, what I typically like to do is push over into the one line. Mostly because your tank destroyers that are going to be camping up in the A1, A2 area aren't going to be able to spot very effectively for themselves. Now, there are other options, but this is my favorite bush by far. This extends your view range well past this rock, which is right here, to anything that might be peeking here, here, and then you can also spot things that might be coming across here, and you can even get shots onto anything behind these buildings. You can actually shoot as long as the enemy is far enough away from you, and you can effectively light anything that's going to be trying to push your base, allowing your vehicles behind you to shoot. Now as you sit here, it's very important that you resist shooting if things get spotted within a certain distance. Only because if you get lit here, it's very common for arty to try to hit you, or there might be a secret tank destroyer sitting back here that it's going to try to shoot you. Now if you do get lit here, it's quite nice because you can just fall back into this hole and prevent yourself from being killed. Now there are two alternatives to this location depending on how aggressive you are, or you want to be, and how many allies you have behind you. Now obviously in this game things didn't really work out, but the first one is this bush here. You can spot up here, but I don't really like it because it doesn't really give you much vision here. And then the last location is down behind this rock here, which you can peek up on both sides and get effective spots on the enemy. Alright, I'm going to show you guys kind of a bonus location that you can spot defensively. Now, this is a common thing that happens on this map where the city gets completely overrun and you're left with tank destroyers and artillery sitting back in this corner. And unfortunately, because they don't have very good view range, they're completely blind to anything that might be shooting them from this ridge here, as well as pushing from down here. Now, as a light tank sitting right here in the middle of the map like this, you command view range all the way down into the city and down almost to the lake. And this leaves anything down there, including tanks that might be pushing up here, vulnerable to your artillery and your tank destroyers. Now, as you sit here, I do have to stress that you do not want to fire a gun, no matter how tempting it is, because when you get lit, anything that could be sitting down here could really mess you up, and you are vulnerable to artillery. And because you're so far forward, you really don't have much of a hill. You have to actually get back here to prevent being hit, and it's a very dangerous position. You really don't want to get lit, so make sure you're completely in the bush like this, and you really prevent yourself from firing. Alright, next let's look at how to spot when you spawn on the southern base. Now the southern base is going to be a little bit different than the north because there's not an initial spot that you go to and then you push across. Now you can sit around here and kind of drive around and get spots on things that are pushing across, but in my opinion this position is much more valuable, and you're about to see why. Now when you get here, I usually like to sit in this bush first before I push up to the next one, only because sometimes light tanks do derp around this corner, and if you get yourself lit, you can get yourself blown away if you're too far forward. Now you want to wait a few seconds and then advance to make sure it's safe, because again, if you push too far forward and you get lit, you're kind of on the other side of the hill and it's very hard to get out of this situation. because tank destroyers will by then usually be ready to shoot you. Now this location is awesome because you can get spots on things that are going to be pushing this corner, which is quite common for medium tanks to do, and it'll also give you view range onto anything that's going to be pushing across here. Now it's very common for tank destroyers to be sitting around here, and sitting here you might not be able to light them immediately, but once they fire at your allies that are lit, they'll light themselves up very, very easily. And you can see here, it's very easy to get a lot of assist damage by sitting here, and you're completely safe as long as, you know, something doesn't rush really, really close to you. I really like this location, and I do think it's stronger than any location that you can take on the northern base because you are able to get lights all the way up onto this little peninsula, whereas if you start on the north, you can't really dig these guys out very easily unless they push forward. Alright, so there is one more bush that you can take over on this side if you're risky. Now if you get lit out here, you're pretty much done, and so I don't recommend it until you're absolutely sure that you're not going to get lit, but it's just right here. And this is just a slightly deeper location than the first spot I showed you, allowing you to get lights just slightly more into this peninsula here, and just giving you, you know, a little bit better chance of lighting those pesky tank destroyers. Now again, you do leave yourself vulnerable to being lit if you're not careful, so I do advise pushing deeper into this bush. But again, an alternative to the other location I showed you, which is up here, and you can even drive down here if you want to just get a little bit more aggressive. Alright, so much like the north base, it's quite common for the city to be taken while your tank destroyers and artillery sit back in the woods. And when this happens, it's crucial that as a light tank, you do get into an aggressive spotting location for your tank destroyers to get that great spotting damage and then ultimately win for your team. Now the bush you want to take is right up here, and you do want to get there relatively quickly because if you're not in this bush by the time the enemies push forward, you could really get yourself killed. Now this bush is very strong only because you can really only get lit from this direction. If you're in this bush, nothing can possibly spot you from over here, allowing you to really dig in. Now there are some bushes up in the field that you can take alongside the base and whatnot, but any of those locations leave you vulnerable to being lit and killed from anything up here, and when that happens, it's game over. Now as you can see, when you sit in this location, you are completely safe from being lit, and you can really do a lot of spotting for your team. Sitting in locations like this, it can be very dangerous because enemies do tend to push up to this boulder here, but when you're here, you're completely safe. And again, this light tank would have lit us if we were anywhere in this area, but being here, you're completely safe, and really it's an awesome location to light anything that even tries to get on your cap because they will not be able to spot you. Anyway guys, hopefully you liked this guide on how to spot Fisherman's Bay. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you give it a like down below. And if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to my channel for more content like this in the future. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, I really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you guys later.